Yeah, that's right. I'm back! Yes, hello everyone. I'm truly back on YouTube, ready to get into the nitty gritty of things I want to talk about. And by that, I mean video games. But you're probably wondering, why'd you pick this game to come back with? And I have an insane answer for you. See, with so many games coming out since I was last time back on YouTube, which was a freaking long time ago, I wanted to talk about this game in particular because, well, I just kind of want to talk about it. So let's waste no more time, get right into it. This is Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Oh man, where do I even begin with how this game finally came to be? I guess we could go back to where time began, the Nintendo 64. The N64 was where a lot of Nintendo's big franchises took their jump to 3D for the first time ever. Super Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, Donkey Kong 64, and then there's Kirby 64, the Crystal Shards. Not a bad game by any means, but certainly not what people would call the first 3D Kirby game. Rather, a bit of a spin on the normal 2D Kirby game with 3D models and a rotating camera. If anything, this would classify as a 2.5D game to an extent. But as the years went on into the 2000s, Kirby really didn't have much of Nintendo's spotlight, with them mostly being relegated to spin-offs and handheld titles. Nothing wrong with any of those games, but I think it's fair to say Kirby fans were definitely feeling the cold shoulder for a bit, and were starving for the next big Kirby experience. And in 2010, it finally happened, kinda. Yes, Kirby's Epic Yarn, developed by Goodfill, released on the Wii, was a really fun and creative 2D platformer with an amazing art style. This game, while incredible, still wasn't a regular Kirby game with no copy abilities, instead having a whip as your main attack and collecting loads of these beads. While not a mainline game technically speaking, this game was both a really great game in its own right, and two, was a big first step for Kirby's big return to the spotlight, which was followed up the very next year with 2011's Kirby's Return to Dreamland on the Wii once again. Now this game, man, I and a lot of other fans really like this game. In fact, this was my very first normal Kirby game I ever played and beat start to finish. Anyways, this game is very fun, walking a good line between traditional Kirby gameplay and bringing said gameplay into the modern age with 4-player multiplayer as a series first, alongside this game's secret sauce, the super abilities. In fact, this year a remastered title, Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, released this year earlier on Nintendo Switch, with redone visuals and some very good extra content. If you're still interested, definitely play this version. Overall, nothing super out of this world on its own merits, but was a fantastic return to form for the series, and did a great job setting the foundation for the next few games. And that train rolled right into 2013 with Kirby Triple Deluxe, and in 2016, Kirby Planet Robobot, both on the Nintendo 3DS. Now these games right here, in my opinion, are both fantastic games, each game better than the last with their own special sauces that separate them. All of them follow the same base formula but with their own twist. In Triple Deluxe, you get the Hypernova, and in Planet Robobot, you get to control a mech. One day I'll give these games their own dedicated videos, but not today. So all is well and good, 3 games in 6 years, all of high quality, each surpassing the last. But as good as they are, you don't want to get too stale with the same normal gameplay. But hey, now we're on the Nintendo Switch, with Nintendo's major franchise getting big, huge new adventures, changing the series status quo. Surely this is the time Kirby finally makes that big leap. Okay, this game is definitely not bad. Let me just explain myself. This game is fine, just kind of underwhelming. Between level designs being way too easy, even for Kirby, a general lack of content at launch, and just not as crazy of a major twist like the last 3 games, it just sort of came and went for me. This game deserves its own video in the future, but moving on, after Star Allies, things seemed pretty quiet for Kirby, aside from a couple spin-offs of sequels to 3DS Kirby spin-offs until 2021. Kirby's 30th anniversary was on the horizon, and HAL Labs was gonna go all out. Their main event is the subject of today's video, Kirby and the Forgotten Land. At long last, Kirby's first truly 3D adventure is here. So what are we waiting for? Did HAL stick the landing on his first 3D outing? Well, let's find out now. Our story, like most Kirby games, begins in the classic Dreamland, with Kirby having another day in paradise when suddenly, a giant portal in the sky opens up and starts sucking up everything around it, including Kirby himself, leading to a forgotten land. where we eventually find Kirby waking up in the first level of Crash Bandicoot. A few soft movement tutorials later, and the game makes an incredible first impression as you make your way out of the woods into the city. The weather effects, the colors, the music, it's all breathtaking. In fact, while I'm on it, I guess I'll discuss the presentation now. This game looks simply incredible, full stop. Hey, it's not the most powerful system, but Nintendo certainly knows how to get the most out of it, and Kirby in the Forgotten Land is no exception to that rule. Colors are incredibly vibrant, character models are super smooth, and performance is very, very solid the whole way through. It's just, wow. Like, it looks amazing. Even if it was on another system, I'd say it looks amazing. Music is also great too. A lot of it I won't say is in the best soundtracks of all time, but they're all at least very catchy, and the main theme of the game, Welcome to the New World, fully voiced by the way, sets the tone for a great adventure. Hey everyone, this is Dan from the future. Actually, Welcome to the New World is the voice music, and Running Through the New World is the music you hear in the first level. Dumb mistake on my part. I'm sorry I didn't notice it sooner, but enjoy the rest of the video and enjoy this next scene. So anyway, back to the story. As Kirby begins exploring, he finds an interesting creature caged up who he then rescues. This is our companion for this game, Elflin, a flying mouse, I think, who we don't really know much about until late game, but is very sweet and is still a friendly face for Kirby to interact with for a while. And from there, Kirby and Elflin find a bunch of Waddle Dees getting caged by a bunch of enemies led by a new group of enemies, the Beast Pack, leading you to rescue them along the way as they make their way through 6 worlds of 4 to 5 levels each. And that's how all the story began until the end, which is a little disappointing at first, but, well, I'll save that for later. So yeah, despite seeing it multiple times at this point, it's crazy we're finally in a 3D space. So let's start with how they transition Kirby himself. Kirby has basically all the same moves he's ever had in a 2D game, spin-offs not included, including the classic suck, the slide kick, the block defend, which now has a special roll you can do when clicking the R button in conjunction with rotating any direction on the analog stick. This is a great movement option in 3D, allowing some more depth to the standard Kirby combat, especially as when you dodge an enemy with perfect timing, you'll go into slow motion and get a chance to do a counter attack with your ability or time to get some extra damage in. All this does a great job making the combat more engaging than it's ever been before in my opinion. In addition, Kirby also has his signature float ability, but to accommodate the shift into 3D, it's now both finite and height limited depending on where you jumped off of. And yeah, that's all of Kirby's normal moves, but the big thing I want to address is how Kirby feels to control. If you take any platforming game, be it 2D or 3D, it can live or die by the feel of the character they're playing as, and Kirby truly controls like a dream in this game. He has just the right amount of weight to him, is fast enough for how the stages are designed, and just feels fun to control, which is the #1 thing they had to nail in the shift. And the exceptional controls and feel extend to the copy abilities as well. Now there aren't quite as many as the past few Kirby games, with only 11 and Sleep making an appearance here, but they all feel great to play with all of them being upgradable as a series first. My personal favorites being Bomb and Sword, especially late game. But I think all these abilities are at the very least good, and amazingly, this game finally got me to actually like the Spike ability, an ability that I never, ever had in my top choices in a Kirby game before. Anyway, with these awesome abilities and Sleep, you can upgrade all your copy abilities once, twice, or sometimes even 3 or 4 times with these special rare stones you can find in the loads of special stages you'll find across the map. These are great, providing little bursts of challenges while also teaching you new things about said abilities that you may have not known before. Some of these can also get pretty tough in the latter half of the game as well, especially if you're going for the fastest times. They're in no way required, but still a fun challenge and give you some extra star coins. But back to upgrading abilities, some of these upgrades are incredibly awesome, like going from bombs to homing bombs, sword to Meta Knight's sword, or fire all the way to Dragon Fire are some of my personal favorites. These upgrades can be found on your journey with these hidden scrolls in the main levels, which will then send to this specific Waddle Dee. But speaking of stages, let's get into the actual levels. Now these levels are certainly quite linear in most instances, but that's far from a bad thing since these levels are absolutely dense with content to find and do, similar to Mario 3D World. And I always find that impressive. And trust me, if you're going to be linear, always shoot for 3D World quality, as well as the Sonic Forces levels of linear. Also, the level themes themselves across the game aren't winning awards in originality on the surface, with your standard themes of grass, water, circus, snow, desert, and lava, respectively. But if you dig just a little deeper, it's really about what they do with these themes that make them more interesting. Yeah, it may just be a normal grassland in the beginning, but you're also traveling in a destroyed city and eventually an abandoned mall. The best thing about it, for me at least, is that all these levels have an overarching idea of the post-apocalypse, which means every little idea they come up with can tie back into the grand one, which really makes this place seem way more immersive and adds heavily to the atmosphere they're going for. Also, having your main city be post the end of the world, starring cutesy Kirby, is just awesome to me. These levels are amazingly well designed, might I add, constantly keeping you glued to the moment-to-moment gameplay, and constantly keeping up the pace with exciting set piece after exciting set piece. There may not be a ton of levels in the long run, but every last one we do have is a winner in my book. And speaking of moment-to-moment gameplay, while you're traveling the land, you're going to come across several shiny items that, despite Kirby's absolute best efforts, he can't for the life of him swallow it. Which is where this game's big idea comes front and center, mouthful mode. You can say this idea really sucks! Mouthful mode is such an ingenious idea for both Kirby in general, but also how great of an idea it is to apply it in a 3D space. From swallowing a car, to various ring-shaped objects, to just a bunch of water. All of these keep the variety in the levels going non-stop until the very end of the game, with plenty of clever puzzles and challenges that put your skills to good use. Like having an entire level dedicated to racetracks for Kirby, or Kirby soaring across the ocean to add some great variety to an otherwise standard Kirby level. I think my favorite transformation is definitely the ring mouth, as it's just really funny watching Kirby walk around with it. I'm very easily entertained, as you can tell. Now all we need is to be able to suck in cars in real life. Imagine how much easier it would be to get around like that.
Wait! Come back! Stop!
So anyways, yeah man, HAL Labs knocked out of the park with their levels in this game. They're certainly not what I would call difficult until maybe the last couple levels, some post-game stuff, but I never find a moment where I'm just going through the motions, unlike Star Allies, which further proves a thought I've always had, where a game can certainly be easy but still engaging. Easy doesn't always have to be boring. But jumping around topics here a bit, back to where I mentioned rescuing Waddle Dees, that's your primary objective here aside from just, well, beating the game. Most levels have around 10 to 11 Waddle Dees in need of rescuing through various means, such as finding hidden paths in a level, finding some caves around if you decide to take some detours, and then some little challenges like beat the boss in a certain time limit, or eat a certain type of food in a level. And if you don't get all of them on your first run, the game will reveal an objective deal on the list, being very non-intrusive, which I like. All the Waddle Dees you rescue do two things in this game. One is they simply unlock the boss of each world if you have enough, which means you have to find a lot of them anyway to beat the game. Two is that they all tie into the game's hub world, Waddle Dee Town. This area is home to a lot of stuff in this game, including Kirby's home away from home, the arena, which I'll discuss later, some slot machines to collect these Smash Bros. Trophy-like figurines, which are still better than spirits, and a few sub-games here as well. Par for the course for a Kirby game. First, we have some fishing. Nothing too crazy here, just time button pressing. But eventually you will work your way up to collecting a visual representation of my body image during COVID-19. We also have Tilt and Roll Kirby, a gyro-based game where you tilt Kirby balls into the holes using said gyro in your controller, which is really fun, but the third stage is one you'll definitely need some patience for. And then we have Waddle Dee Cafe, where you can buy items to help you along your journey, as well as have a side job here, which is pretty fun, even including a lunch rush speed difficulty too. Oh boy! But as someone who recently left fast food, yeah, I'm already getting bad flashbacks. So moving on, the best thing about Waddle Dee Town to me is just like the Comet Observatory in Super Mario Galaxy, the town gets built up and gets livelier across the game as you save more, which is really fulfilling to me. So you do it all, travel the land, save hundreds of Waddle Dees along the way, get yourself into all sorts of shenanigans, and then you make your way to the end of World 4, where it's time to face the big bad himself, King Dedede, in a pretty exciting boss fight. But just when it looks like he's down for the count, he sneaks into the results screen and snatches Elflin. From there, he's then taken to a nearby island leading to two more worlds of the desert and lava lands respectively. A couple hours later, deep in a deserted factory, you find yourself rematching the Mad King, who's now wearing a very strange mask, but he's still no match for our favorite piece of gum. And after another spectacular boss fight, the mask breaks with DDD seemingly coming out of a funk, reuniting with his fellow Waddle Dees and Kirby. But unfortunately, no time to celebrate, as bad news comes straight for them with an army of enemies charging straight at them. From there, they make their way for a nearby elevator, but with a Waddle Dee tripping, DDD sacrificed himself for his minions, staying behind to hold them off. We then load into an elevator and...
Activated. Authentication system activated. Authenticating. Authenticating.
English voice acting in a Kirby game? Yeah, I have never felt such an unnerving feeling from the English language. Anyway, as we make our way up the elevator, the voice talks about something called the Ultimate Life Form, with its codename being ID-F86. Here we also find the rest of the captured Waddle Dees running on hamster wheels, leading us to a long, ominous, destroyed hallway. We go on in, and we find a huge lion who goes by Leongar, the leader of the Beast Pack, who then tells us about said Ultimate Life Form, formerly known as Fecto Forgo, where he then explains that the previous users of this world experimented on this creature and used its warping powers to leave this world behind. But before that happened, a warping experiment 30 years ago caused this being to split into two halves, with its other half not being found until now. Yeah, it's Elflin! Anyways, Leongar then reveals his motivations of hoping to also gain these powers for himself, which is why all the Waddle Dees were captured, so that they can be used to power this experiment. Leongar, of course, won't let Kirby stand in his way so easily, followed by a boss fight where we, of course, take him down just like everything else in this Forsaken game. But as soon as he's knocked out, he speaks in a very strange tone, saying his plans are ruined and no more waiting, when Fecto opens his eyes saying, "Everything shall be consumed." Moving on, Fecto then turns into a bunch of blue goop and begins to grab a bunch of enemies that followed us here, in addition to Leongar turning into this giant... of enemies, and I gotta be honest, this thing still creeps me out in general. So I'm moving on. We defeat it after a short chase along the hallway, and even though it seems down for the count, it grabs Elflin and heads to the roof, where it's time for the final encounter. Once you arrive at the roof, we see Elfilus and his other half combined into its true form, Fecto Elfilus, in a truly climactic battle. And this fight is really, really good. He uses dimensional rifts to bring in giant debris to squash us, giant lasers, he turns the sky into a colorful mess of an arena halfway through, and it's actually pretty tough the first time through. Once you get his health low enough, well, there's no other way to say this, literally suck off Fecto to get Elfilus detached from him. But even with their best efforts, Fecto isn't exactly through yet, as he uses the last of his power to summon a giant portal in the sky, trying to pull the entirety of Planet Popstar to collide with this world. With no options left for our heroes, a giant truck conveniently lands next to Kirby and Elflin, and this ending sequence is the best thing ever with Kirby in a giant race to reach Fecto before worlds collide at 1,000 miles an hour with debris and floating buildings everywhere, eventually making the truck fly with the help of Elflin, and then it becomes a giant anime moment ending as we button mash our way through the last of his events and slam right through him! Sorry about that. Anyway, Fecto is dead, but the portal is still open with Kirby back on Popstar. Unfortunately, Elflin stays behind to close the portal. Spoiler alert, he's fine. But good lord, what a way to end the game. That is until you head into the Isolated Isles, a new set of levels featuring bits and pieces of past levels remixed with new scenarios after the credits, while you gather pieces of Leongar's soul to revive him. This is basically your standard second run of levels like in most Kirby games, but in a more streamlined and original fashion, and to me, a really cool way to extend the game past the credits. Eventually, once you gather all the pieces, you make your way back to Fecto's lair, where upon reviving Leongar, it turns out he's already been taken over by Fecto again, leading to an intense boss fight with them. Upon defeating the possessed Leongar, Fecto reveals himself, and just as you're about to face off against him, a little butterfly suspiciously resembling the one from the opening cutscene flies into the room, merges with Fecto, and it turns out that very butterfly was Morpho Knight, an evil clone of Meta Knight, now combined with the powers of Forgo. This fight is brutal too. Make sure to master that dodge maneuver. But eventually, once you defeat him, you see Fecto teleport away at the very end, where you can find him once more in this game's arena. The arena has always been a mainstay in Kirby games, and it's no different here. It's your normal boss rush, with a few different levels of difficulty that unlock as you progress through the story. This is also where you can find Meta Knight mid-game and gain his ability upgrade, with an epic fight to top it off. But anyway, back to Forgo. Finishing the Isolated Isles, you unlock Ultimate Cub Z, which is without doubt the ultimate challenge in this game. I fully recommend bringing a Maximum Tomato with you and equipping the cop ability you feel the absolute best with. In addition to fighting all the harder versions of the game's bosses from the Isolated Isles, you also have a rematch with Meta Knight, another battle with Morpho Knight, and topping it off with the final version of Fecto, Chaos Elfless. And this guy is 100% no joke, especially for first time players. In addition to some new moves separate from the original fight with Fecto Elfless, Chaos Elfless has a massive health bar to clear. But before you know it, you will manage to take him down, and then
And here we are.
he turns into a big giant ball of darkness and will immediately kill you with a black hole attack if you don't expect it. You know, standard Kirby stuff. This is the true final battle of Forgotten Land. And my lord, you better bring your A game, or this thing will have no problem reducing you to literal atoms in seconds and sending you back to the beginning of the arena. In time though, with enough effort and perseverance, the true form of Chaos Elfless finally surrenders to Kirby and gives the last remains of his power to Elflin, marking their true return to being a whole being. And that, my friends, is the true end of Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Guys, what a gem of a game. From the level designs to the presentation, the new ideas presented, just how much fun this game is. HAL Laboratories, with no question, perfectly stuck Kirby's 3D landing. If you're any fan of platformers or just fun games period, I cannot recommend this game enough. It may not be all that long or even difficult, around 20-ish hours for 100%, but it is so much fun for the whole ride, and I seriously cannot wait for the future of our favorite pink puffball. Oh, sorry. So another review comes to a close. Now y'all are probably wondering, what's next we're going to talk about? Well, let's just say there's a certain subset of games that I've always wanted to talk about with my own feelings. I think it's finally time for me to do it. So next time we meet, it's going to be Mario's time to shine for quite a while with his first 3D outing, Super Mario 64. So until then, this has been Dan from Dan's Game Zone signing out. Hope y'all have a good one. Stay safe. I'll see you all next time.
Follow my Twitch.